Hey everyone, Cursed Deck Builder here, and we are looking at the most dangerous gamer, an attraction deck that has been sent to us by Robin. Robin says that they love the deck because of the insanity it can cause when they roll for attractions and do all the weird, wonderful things it lets them do. The problem is it usually doesn't run as well as I feel it could, and a few times it's caused me to outdraw my ability to play cards. I would just like another set of eyes and possibly suggestions on things to improve its chaotic good times. And they have a bit of a restriction of no card worth more than 30 US dollars and no more than $100 in updates. Well, I don't think we're going to get to that level, so I will give you very budget options. So, who is the most dangerous gamer and what are attractions? As always, the deck list will be in the video description below, and I highly recommend, especially for an attraction deck, to open this up and take a look. I can't go through all of the attractions, and they're a lot of fun, so I really do recommend you go through them, see what they are, and see how fun and silly, an unset commander can be. Now, important to say right at the start is despite being an unset commander, the most dangerous gamer is legal in Eternal formats. It doesn't have the little acorn there, so that's good to know. Let's talk about attractions. What are attractions? The most dangerous gamer is a 2/2 for 4 death touch, and when they ETB or attack, you open attraction. And whenever you open attraction, you put a +1/+1 counter on the most dangerous gamer. And whenever you claim the prize of an attraction, you vindicate. But we'll kind of ignore that last part, and I'll explain why later. So what does it mean to open an attraction? Well, you have a side deck that is called an attraction deck. This one has 21 cards in it. It is shuffled face down at the start of the game. And whenever you quote unquote open attraction, you flip the top card and it enters, I think it enters play. I don't know if they count as permanents. Actually, it's an artifact. Okay, so they are artifacts. So they are in play and they are artifacts. Now, the way they work is they have something called visit. And what that means is during your upkeep on every turn when you have any attractions, you're going to roll a d6. And then if the number that you've rolled is lit up on the right side of the attraction, you can see here that 3 and 6 on Foam Weapons Kiosk are highlighted. If it's one of the highlighted numbers, then you will trigger the ability of visit. Now, you might notice 6 is always highlighted because if you roll 6, you always get the effect, and 1 is never highlighted. Now, let's look at Fortune Teller, for example. This allows us to scry 1 every turn. If we roll, there's a 50% chance to scry 1 every turn. These are really fun, especially as you get more and more attractions, because then one good dice roll does a lot more. Granted, one bad dice roll does nothing then, but generally, if you get enough, any roll that's not a 1 or 6 will at least trigger a few of them, and a 6, whew, you trigger all of them. Really great. It's very clear that the purpose of this deck is to play as many attractions as possible. And despite that being the theme, I actually have little to say on the attractions. They're very fun and very silly. And that's it. That's the whole idea. You're going to start flipping them and you're going to start visiting them. And I don't think there's much else I want to say about that because that is working as intended. The problems are for the deck builder is they're feeling the deck could be they say it's not working as well as they think it does. I tend to assume that is a problem of fluidity or closing games. And we're going to address both of those. So a lot of that has very little to do with the attraction deck. Because if the deck is working, the attraction deck is working. So let's go down, do our regular thing, look at our CMC curve, and it's very nice. I'm very impressed by this. We've got an 8 and a 9, which I believe are Garrick's Wake and Decree of Pain, which will return to those, and 1/6, which is Casualties of War. But otherwise, we can see that the deck has a pretty low curve. I really like this. Looking at this deck, I've reread it a few times, and I think this is a very strong introductory deck. It almost feels like a pre-constructed deck. There's a lot of cards here that I would consider to be a weaker mana cost for the effect than you'd like. For example, uh, Blood Pact is not a card I would probably play when we have access to other cards, especially though they're already playing Sign in Blood and Read the Bones. But these are the cards you expect in these in a precon. So I think intentionally or not, you've built a very solid deck that is accessible and has a firm power level. I think the few things you're missing is more to do with ratios, and we'll get to closing games after. There are a few questionable choices as well, but let's 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 start with ratios. So something you've mentioned is that you've outdrawn your ability to play cards. My understanding of that is that you keep drawing cards and you keep not having things to play, and you go over 7 cards because you keep drawing cards. In addition, at least a few of these attraction decks probably put more cards in your hand. I know one at least draws. So it makes sense that you are kind of going over. Now, you've kind of created a feedback loop unintentionally. I understand that card draw is a very big part of Commander, and you want to see more cards, so you put more card draw. Then you need to see more cards that aren't card draw, so you put more card draw. To the point that we come here and you're playing Spellbook to have no maximum hand size. Once again, Decanter of Endless Water also to have no maximum hand size. These are not particularly good cards, but they become necessary when the plan is to just keep drawing cards. And then when you keep drawing cards, you draw into more of your draw cards. Like we've got Sign in Blood, into Read the Bones, into Promise of Power, into Synth of Mind, into I saw it before, Blood Pact. Like there's a lot here. And I don't know if this is the kind of deck that needs that level of card draw. I'm not going to suggest taking a lot of it out, but we can see that you already have an engine that is your commander. Your commander will create card advantage by just staying there, by attacking, by being destroyed and reanimated. So I don't know to what degree how many card draw effects we really need. What I wouldn't mind personally is 1 or 2 more ramp effects. We've got Broken Bond, we've got Edge of Autumn, and I know Edge of Autumn's there specifically because you can cycle it and then draw another card, but that's probably actually not what you want because you want to get ahead on mana, and when you have 4 or more lands, you can no longer get ahead on mana. So I would prefer something else to that. Cultivate. You have a good number. I think just 1 or 2 more. We have a Signet. We can play Golgari Signet. That's pretty good. Uh, and then the Talisman, if I can spell it, of Resilience, just down here. Also very cheap. Just 2 nice artifacts, just to give you a little more, uh, just give you a little more of a push. You really want to be able to play the most dangerous gamer on turn 2. So 2 mana rocks, 2 mana ramp abilities are really, really strong. After that, the next thing I'm kind of thinking of is the ability to close games. And I think that's the interesting part of this deck. I think you have a lot of means to get ahead, but you're struggling to use that advantage to get anywhere. Now, there's a lot of options for this. I could be giving you big green and black creatures to beat down with, but that's not really what I want to do. I think this deck is very built on triggers, right? At the start of your turn, you get a bunch of effects. Now, I want things like that to work. I want more triggers. And because I think this is the fun part of the deck is by overwhelming your opponents with so many things on your board. It does make you, this strategy will make you a little weaker towards planar cleansing effects that destroy all types of permanents. But at the power level you're playing, like something has to give. Every deck needs a weakness at that point, and mass destruction is a reasonable weakness. So what kind of cards am I talking about? So if I can spell painful correctly, Painful Quandary is a cheap card that's really nice that puts a lot of pressure on your opponents. You drop Painful Quandary and then you forget about it. It becomes a thorn on your opponent's side, and they need to really think about the level of planning and life loss they're going to be and the way they play their cards. Otherwise, they're going to fall behind incredibly fast. People really underestimate how quickly 5 life per cast adds up, and it's important to remember that this also it puts a lot of stress onto their hand size, and so they're going to be hell bent as an out of cards in their hand incredibly quickly. Not only does that make Painful Quandary better, but it also just puts them behind in the game. There are other cards that have the same. I think it's Toxic Fumes. Could be wrong. Let's just look up Fumes. Necrogen Fumes, right? No? Hmm. Upkeep each player. Discard. Maybe it's not each player. Let's go. Because I know that's a creature has that. So, yes. Okay. So, Necrogen Mist says at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player discards a card from his or her hand, from their hand. Real nice. This is a nice bit of pressure. Cutting Lithomancer does the same thing, but it all happens on your upkeep. I like this a little less. It's easier to get rid of, but it does it does have another copy of this. It is another copy of this effect. This is $7. I'm very surprised by that. I didn't realize that went up in price so much. So cutting Lithomancer might be the cheaper one. Bottomless Pit is somehow cheaper than Necrogen Mists, even though it's better. I don't quite understand that, but absolutely Bottomless Pit. It's the same effect of Necrogen Mists, but it's random. I imagine it's frustrating because people don't want to be the ones discarding randomly, but you have enough card advantage that you can push through it. The other one I often think it's not blackmail. I often recommend with Bottomless Pit is Oppression. That's what it is. Oppression, a little more pricey, unfortunately, but this effect says whenever a player plays a spell, they discard a card. It works really well with Painful Quandary. Now, this is going higher in the budget than I wanted to, but I just wanted to have you aware of these kind of cards, right? These kind of cards are really nice. They provide pressure on your opponent's on your opponent's hands and boards and life totals by making them having to decide how to play, when to play. And you are pushing ahead, even though most of these effects also affect you, because you have a ton of triggers. Additionally, another direction to go. What I often do is when I want this kind of win condition, this might help. Go to black green, I want a black enchantment, and I want to go 6 mana and above. So I'm going to put greater than 5 mana. We're going to look for enchantments. Now, this might seem like a silly way to do it, but this is where I find often the cards that I want to close the games. There's always one more that I forget. Unfortunately, it's not here, but this is just one opponent. But let's focus on Grave Betrayal. Grave Betrayal is $5 and says whenever a creature you don't control dies, it gets reanimated on your side of the field at the end of the turn. This is a fantastic power level for the it's a fantastic card for the power level of the deck you're playing. You get to ramp into this, you're getting advantage, you play Grave Betrayal, and you're just going to leave it out. This is a card that requires no further work on your end. Yes, you could be destroying creatures to be getting that effect more often, but you don't need to, right? This card will gain its power by itself. Your opponents will be destroying each other's creatures. They'll be attacking. They will be sacrificing creatures. You're going to get the benefit out of it. So this is another card that you can just drop it, forget it, and it's just another thing on the battlefield for your opponents to worry about. I think likewise, I'm thinking of we can look into cheap planeswalkers in the colors. How expensive is Liliana of the Veil? I am very curious. $15. Okay, we won't do that. That is another really good discard card that pressures opponents without being too broken or powerful in Commander as it is in Pioneer or other formats, because it is really easy to attack down Liliana. Okay, instead, let us see another Liliana. Let's go from 4 mana. Where are you? Waker of the Dead is a few bucks. Waker of the Dead has the same plus as Liliana of the Veil, except for it also deals damage. This is a great card to drop to just add to the pressure. And then if you want, you can play. I actually don't know the price of the 3 mana Heretical Heal. Not too. Oh, from Cute to Brute. Yeah, not too bad. Few bucks. Leela, Heretical Healer. When a creature dies, she transforms. Unfortunately, she can't reanimate your commander, which is a big thing you seem to be doing. However, she reanimates other cards, and she has the same pressure on your opponents. I think these discard effects will put enough pressure that allows you to pull ahead and stall the game out. Because you have to remember, every subsequent turn that goes by, your attractions get better because you have another chance to visit them. So with that in mind, you have to stall the game out. You have to slow it down. For the now that makes me want to put a few more cards in. It makes me want to put some effects like Languish, which I don't believe you have. No. Languish is a very nice, cheap card. Sorry, I'm going to put it to the art that I'm used to. That gives all creatures -4/-4. Your commander can live through it once it gets into +1/+1 counters, but more importantly, it's a board clear. It's a stall. Another one is creatures each swamp is Mutilate. Mutilate is also very cheap and does -1/-1 for each swamp you control, which means it either can be bigger or smaller than Language. Still, particularly strong to wipe the board and particularly cheap. Then the last thing I want to kind of mention here is I would like the Saraseer here, Visceraseer, a few 30 cents, and every time I forget this zombie's name. Sacrifice, counter, yes, counter block. That's the one always. Carrion Feeder. So both Visceraseer and Carrion Feeder have an ability that says sacrifice a creature. That's it. Now, one gets stronger, the other one scries. Those are both fine. The reason I'm suggesting these is if you've noticed, well, you've made the deck, but I've noticed Feign Death, Supernatural Stamina, Undying Evil, Undying Malice, Abnormal Endurance, Demonic Gifts, Fake Your Own Death, Return to Action. Let's go down. There's a few others. I think Kaya's Ghost Form, Minions Return, right? These are all cards that trigger when your creature dies. And I understand why they're there. You hold them up, you attack with the most dangerous gamer, and you hope they destroy it. And then when they destroy it, you get another trigger because you reanimate it instantly. Perfect. Love it. I have no problem with this. My one thought is I would like you to be able to trigger it yourself. Carrion Feeder and Visceraseer will be able to sacrifice the most dangerous gamer at instant speed. This might be something, as you've said, a bit of a problem you may have run into where you overdraw your deck. I think I think you are drawing sometimes a lot of these undying evil effects, these feign death effects. And if you don't have your commander out, or you don't have the means for him to die, they just rot in your hand. So having just one or two cards that can kind of enable that would make a big difference. Now, finally, I'm going to close up with some cuts or some ideas of cuts. I think Garrick's Wake, Decree of Pain. I've given you lower mana board clears as suggestions because Garrick's Wake is 9 mana. That is a lot. You do not need this level of power in this deck because in Garrick's Wake is really strong when you have a particularly vicious board to fight with, but you notice you have 12 creatures. I would much rather have this as languish, have this as a lower cost, because you're often not going to lose that much, even if you do lose stuff. And even if you're going to lose most dangerous gamer, you have feign death, and you need mana to do that. So languish is better at a lower cost. Decree of Pain, very similarly, I like that for 5 mana. You can cycle this. This is fine. I don't know. I don't particularly like it. 8 mana is a lot. That's my opinion. Your mileage will vary. Casualties of War as well feels like a really strong card, but usually works in strategies that can recur it repeatedly and that can, ramp into it very, very quickly. It's okay. It's just okay, unfortunately. It doesn't like when the stars align, you get what is this, a 5 for 1? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's a 6 for 1, right? But when this, no, it's 5. Sorry. It's a 5 for 1. It doesn't hit battles. But sometimes you have to consider the quality of the 5 for 1 because if you are waiting to get that 5 for 1, you might have to wait for maybe some not great targets. Planeswalkers are hard to come by. Artifacts are fine, but do you really want to destroy a mana rock? Enchantments are come and go. Like you don't want to cast this for 6 and blow up a creature in a land, right? You want to get all of the abilities. And for that reason, I don't particularly like it. I think it's got too many hoops to jump through. I think something like Beast Within, which you're already playing, is just more reliable. And finally, Promise of Power just feels like a lot of mana. It's a lot of mana. You're tapping out your entire turn to play this, you're drawing 5, and then you're going to discards because you have more than 7 cards. I think this was a really fun card. When I made my first commander deck, I put this in, and now it's just too much. It's too much mana to do something that's just, kind of unnecessary here with all of the card draw that you have. 100% of the time, I'd rather play Reed Bones than Promise of Power. Technically, yes, you could instead just make the demon, and yes, there's the dream of entwining it, but realistically, if you're casting this, you're casting this to draw. Is there anything else I want to say? No. I was thinking of innocent blood effects where every player sacrifices, but that doesn't work because most dangerous gamer needs to be on the field. So I'm gonna end my suggestions there. Oh, sorry. One more thing. You're playing a lot of lands. You could cut those lands down. You cut down to like 34 and put the signets in and the talisman in, so you get the mana rocks, and I think you'd be fine there. This is quite a few, so you'd be fine to cut a few of this. Otherwise, I do really like this deck. I don't think it needs to be dramatically changed. A few cards in and out, and this deck will settle on what I think is a very appropriate power level for an attraction deck. Once you get the problem out for having a few finishers, once again, I recommend some enchantment-based finishers or planeswalkers. Then you're going to be just very much ahead. You're gonna be able to close games out by stalling them, gaining your benefits from your attraction deck, and then turn by turn punishing your opponents for playing the game, which is a great thing to do. I hope this has been helpful. I really like this deck, and if you make another draft of it, I'd love to see it. Or if you'd like to show me another deck, you can fill out the form that is in the YouTube description below. I also would appreciate if you would like, comment, and subscribe, do the whole YouTube thing. The channel is very new and benefits from those things. All right, good luck.